It's always a pleasure to be able to be awarded the opportunity to stand before you and say this wonderful speech that I love. I am a little rusty. I'm getting a little bit older, so y'all just bear with me a little. 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who have been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of captivity. But 100 years later, we must face the tragic fact that the Negro is still not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty amidst a vast ocean of material prosperity and finds himself in exile in his own land. 100 years later, the Negro is still languishing in the corners of America's society and finds himself in exile in his own land. So we have come here today to dramatize this appalling condition. In a sense, we have come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. In this note was the promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today, however, that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we've come here today to cash this check. A check that will give us, upon demand, the riches of freedom and the securities of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to lift this nation up from the dark and desolate valleys of segregation to the sunlit paths of racial justice. Now is the time to make freedom and equality and justice real for all of God's children. It will be fatal for this nation to return to business as usual. This sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. Those of you who had hoped that the Negro only needed to blow off some steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if this nation returns to business as usual. There will neither be rest nor tranquility until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of this nation until the bright day of justice emerges. But there is something that I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads to the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. We must not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. But we must always continue to fight on the high plains of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protests to degenerate to physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. This marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community cannot lead us to a distrust of all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evident by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up to our destiny and that their freedom is bound inextricably to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make the solemn pledge that we shall march ahead. We cannot turn back. Now, there are those of you who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of our highways or in the hotels of our cities. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their dignity by signs that read "for whites only." We can never be satisfied as long as a Negro in the state of Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in the state of New York believes he has nothing which to vote. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness from a mighty stream. Now see, I am not unmindful that some of you have come here from great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come here fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom has left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the victims of creative suffering. Continue to fight with the knowledge that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Alabama. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to North Carolina. Go back to Georgia. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and hills and ghettos of our northern cities, knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. And so I say to you today, so that even though we may face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream that is deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day the state of Mississippi, sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and equality. I have a dream that one day my 4 little children will be able to live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the contents of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that even down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governors whose lips are dripping with words of interposition and nullification, yes, even down in Alabama, little black boys and little black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and little white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and every mountain will be made low, every rough place shall be made plain, every crooked place shall be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, so that all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I will take back to the South with me. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of a mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up and fight for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. And when this day comes, we will be able to join hands and we will be able to sing with new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty. Of thee I sing from every mountain. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty. Of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of my pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And when we allow freedom to ring, when we let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire, from the mighty mountains of New York, from the heightening Alleghanies of Pennsylvania, from the snow-capped mountains of Colorado. But not only that, when we allow freedom to ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia, from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee, from every hill and every molehill of Mississippi, from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, this will be the day. This will be the day that we will be able to join hands with all God's children, black men, white men, Jews, Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics. We will all be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last. Thank you.